The first step to completing the square in this equation is to separate our c value from our x variables. And in order to do that, we can simply subtract our c value from both sides of the equation, which is going to give us x squared plus 16x equals negative 2. Notice how I left a space open in the second line of my work next to the 16x. That's because the next step actually involves us replacing our c value with another value. And that value is our b value divided by 2 and then squared. In this case, 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 squared is 64. But we can't just add that to the left side. Anything we do, we have to also add to the other side. So that, when simplified, gives us x squared plus 16x plus 64 equals 62. Then we have to factor out the left side of that equation. And in order to do so, we have to find a value, in this case 8, that when added with itself gives us our b value, but then when multiplied with itself gives us our c value. Like I said, that's positive 8. The expression x plus 8 squared will be equivalent to the left side of this equation here. And remember, we're trying to solve x, so in order to do that, we have to take the square root of both sides, which is going to give us x plus 8 equals the square root of 62. And because of the square root property of equality, we know that every number has 2 possible square roots, and that's because if you multiply if you find the absolute value that when multiplied by itself will give you the number that you're looking for, it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative, because the negatives are going to cancel out and the positives are going to remain positive. So therefore, if you make that absolute value either negative or positive, it won't matter, you're going to end up getting the same number. So we know that when we subtract our 8 from the left side of our equation, we're going to have to do it to the positive square root of 62 and also the negative square root of 62, which, if you want to simplify that even more, is going to get you x equals negative 0.126 and x equals negative 15.87 as well. You're going to want to plug those x values back into your equation to make sure that it makes it true, because if the statement isn't true once you plugged in your x value, well, then you know you've made a mistake. In this case, I did that work and it both ended up turning out, so these are the correct x values. The difference between standard and vertex form is what the different forms tell you about the quadratic function. In vertex form, we can see that it actually gives us a piece of information, and that information is what are the coordinates of the vertex of the parabola. In this case, it would be coordinate 2, 5, and as we can see, vertex form just lays that out simply for us. In order to find your standard form from your vertex form, you simply solve the expression that's on the side of the equation, and that will end up multiplying out to be your standard form. And in standard form, you can factor it out to get your vertex form. Sometimes it's easier to work with vertex form versus standard form, sometimes it's not. So that's the difference. On completing the square, it's best to complete the square when your c value is already separated from the equation, but also when you're trying to find complex answers, because finding complex answers is much more simple when you're doing completing the square versus trying to factor it out or something.